what might end up happening is the following. It could be the case, remember, we started here with, I'll make it bigger, we started here with B, and we said that this is encroachment, and that's A. Then we looked like this, and we said that this is A, and this is B, and that this is A and B, right? And we talked about political obstructionism resulting from this point, right? This is exactly where it's resulting, because there's a recognition that the old paradigm is being subsumed by, is being encroached upon by the new paradigm. The conclusion, so this will be 1, this will be 2, and this will be 3. So we have encroachment, and actually I should label this. 1 is encroachment. We have encroachment, we have resistance, so we have encroachment, we have resistance, and then the last thing that we can have is this, right? A and B. Right? The last thing that we can have is this, A and B, which, to be honest with you, is the best outcome. And what is this? This is the new paradigm. This is the new paradigm. The question is, what's the difference between the old paradigm, A, and the new paradigm, A and B? Well, the difference between the old paradigm and the new paradigm is that the new paradigm can account for everything that the old paradigm accounted for, right? The new paradigm can account for everything that the old paradigm can account for, but it can also account for this new additional thing, right? It can account for this new additional thing, B, which this never had. So, technically speaking, with respect to the status quo, it would be to the best interest of those who so fervently attempt to protect the status quo, to accept the new paradigm, because really nothing was lost in the old paradigm, right? Everything that the old paradigm addressed, the new paradigm addresses, and we get this additional quote-unquote benefit, right? There's something else that can be incorporated by this new paradigm that wasn't incorporated in the old paradigm. So the argument might be as follows. The old paradigm put accountability on the particular individual seeking medical insurance, right? So that if there is a lapse in coverage, the individual understands the significance of employment, because if there's a lapse, if I lose my job, if I drop my coverage, and I end up getting sick within that period of time, and I then get coverage after the fact, we as a population understand, we know what the expectations are, right? That you're on your own, because your situation will be pre-existing, right? So we understand that. If we understand that, nothing has changed, we understand that our situation will be pre-existing. There is a label associated, affixed to the, there's a word, a term, affixed to the concept of not having this medical coverage during a lapse of time. That term, so that I don't have to use the word, all those words every time, is pre-existing. So a quick tangent, right? J.R. Rowling in the Harry Potter series comes up with the idea of muggle, right? And the question is, well, what is a muggle? And a muggle is someone who doesn't practice magic. That's what it is, right? But instead of always writing someone who does not practice magic every time she wants to use this term, instead of fleshing out the concept, someone who does not practice magic, she says a muggle. So instead of saying someone who does not practice magic walks into the room, she says a muggle walks into the room. Much easier, right? So what we've done now is, instead of saying someone who has had a lapse in their coverage during a time of employment, or a time when they dropped coverage, has gotten sick, and then has decided to get new coverage, instead of saying all of that, we just say they have a pre-existing situation. So we've maintained the idea of pre-existing situation. What we've changed, right, the thing that has changed is not the idea of pre-existing situation, but we've changed the expectation, right? That's what's important. The expectation has changed. The expectation in the former status quo was that if you have this pre-existing situation, you expect not to be covered. We're still talking about pre-existing situations, But what we've changed is the expectation, because now if you have a pre-existing situation, we're expecting to be covered. And it doesn't have to be clear, it doesn't have to be as black and white as no coverage at all or complete coverage. There might be a gradient of coverage, right, depending on any number of circumstances. But that's the point. What this new paradigm does is it preserves the notion of pre-existing situation. That hasn't changed, right? That is also addressed. But what has changed is how we expect, our expectations of having pre-existing situations has changed, right? And thus what we've done is we've changed the paradigm, right? The paradigm is shifted. Those who do not want, and this is important now, right? This is the key, right? Those at this stage, right, who do not want and recognize, this is only if they recognize it. If they don't recognize it, you can't really hold them accountable, right? But, you know, now I've made this video so people should start to see what's going on. Those of the status quo who are attempting to defend the status quo and who do not want the expectation to change, that if you have a pre-existing situation, you will still be able to get coverage. The question is, why wouldn't you want someone to have coverage? Right? The question is, why wouldn't you want someone to have coverage? That's not something that I can answer. But here's what I can think of just off the top of my head. It may be the case that to talk about this in general, right? A person who has worked for a year and contributed tax-paying dollars for a year hasn't contributed as much to the betterment of American society in paying tax dollars, in paying federal tax dollars, city tax dollars, state tax dollars, in paying Social Security benefits, and paying towards Medicare. They haven't contributed as much to the betterment of American society as someone who's worked for 25 years, right? So it could be the case that we have someone who has worked for 1 year prior to lapse, and we have another person who has worked 25 years prior to lapse, right? Obviously, this person has contributed much more to American society, much more in tax dollars. They're more vested than, quote unquote, this person, right? Though the fact they still have lapse, right? So what they do share, despite this difference, is that they share a pre-existing situation. They both have pre-existing situations, right? So this person only worked 1 year, right? Let's say it's a 18-year-old, just graduated from high school, just got his or her first job at college, worked, you know, was responsible, got medical insurance, so on and so forth, realized how much it costs for medical insurance, dropped the coverage, got sick that year, got another job, and they said, hey, we can't cover you because in that year where you lapsed your coverage, you got sick and we're not going to cover you, right? This person worked 25 years, maintained the job for 25 years, recession hits, loses their job, come back, wasn't really that sick during those 25 years, and now has a new job and got sick in those 25 years. The lapse is the same, but the contribution is different. Now we can talk, right? Because the question is, should we analyze a pre-existing situation in the same way for both of these people, right? This person's obviously contributed more, this person's contributed less. Can we talk about varying degrees of pre-existing situations? If that's the discussion that we're having, then at least we recognize that things are moving, right? At least we recognize that we're willing to start analyzing what do we mean when we say pre-existing situation. If it's simply the case that we say, we're going to maintain the status quo and pre-existing situations will not be covered under any circumstance, regardless of any discussion. And then we have another group that says, no, pre-existing situations should be covered under any discussion, under any situation. Then what you're going to have is just a lot of back and forth, right? And the reason why the American people get tired, and the reason why, you know, people in general get tired, is that there's just this back and forth. There's a failure to recognize that there's varying degrees, right? That there's a gradient, right?